say. But we all might experience what are these sort of deep archetypes of the collective unconscious. So Jung would say that there are these archetypes deep in our minds in the collective unconscious that have been expressing themselves through humanity for millennia, for probably tens of thousands of years. As long as human beings have had sort of the cognition to create these archetypes, they've been with us. Things like vampires and elves and dragons exhibit themselves in different cultures worldwide. They spring up separately in different places, and it's because there's something inside us that gravitates to these archetypes. So I have a daughter who reminds me of an elf because she's always making things, and she loves Christmas, and when Christmas would roll around, she would decorate the whole house, and not only that, but she'd be making presents for everybody, making presents for like neighbors down the road who she didn't even know, and like delivering them to those neighbors. And it's like that elf archetype was so strong in her. Others might be like vampires. Vampires are just like those people that suck your energy. They control you. They're very domineering. They're very sexy. You know, like they have. I think a lot of women have an attraction to vampires. At least sort of the archetype of the vampire. So we're going to talk about these archetypes, how they play out in our lives, but then we're also going to talk about sort of where our belief in things, like where we think these are just imaginary archetypes versus like sort of real life-ish types of creatures and things that go bump in the night, and archetypes that might really be influencing you, or we're talking about sort of symbols here. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know whether they're symbols or not, but we're gonna play around with that stuff. So there we are. Shakti, what do you got for us? Oh, and our co-host today, Shakti, say hello.
Hey there. Hey, everybody. Oh, okay. Back. I'm
okay.
back.
All right.
All right. Well, Garrett, you're absolutely right when it comes to these archetypes, these mythological creatures, these beings that we have that show up in our TV shows, in movies. We've got Game of Thrones, we've got Vampire Diaries. The thing is as long as it's a collective belief, and as long as people are feeding into that type of energy, they're always going to exist. And vampires, I've had lots of personal experience with vampires. I think it gets as it expands itself as far as it gets into human DNA, and people have tendencies to act like a vampire, or tendencies to act like an elf, or just have certain characteristics that come with these archetypes, and therefore we act them out, and that's what makes up and creates our reality as of right now.
So I have a theory that that the archetypes are kind of, maybe they're in our DNA, but I would even venture to say they're also kind of in our souls, like that our souls kind of express towards these. And that's actually a good question. I never really thought it through. Like, is it a DNA thing or is it a soul thing? And if you look, go ahead.
Oof, I'm pretty sure it's a DNA thing. It's both. It is a spiritual thing. It's an emotional thing. It's a DNA thing. There's reasons why people act certain ways, why people are more aggressive than others, and other people are more healing than others. But keep going with what you've got.
Well, I mean, I never thought about this before, but now that I think about it, elves would be like if we stay true to the archetype, we stay true to the story, whether it's Lord of the Rings or the elves that, work up on the North Pole or whatever, or the forest elves. It's like that would seem to be a DNA thing, a genetic thing. It's like you're born an elf. You don't get turned into an elf. You're born an elf. However, then there's the archetypes like vampires that look like that's something that you get turned into. That, if you've been preyed upon by a narcissistic parent or some other vampire-ish type person in your life, and it gets deep enough into your psyche that then you can turn into a vampire. You start expressing like a vampire. So I think like different archetypes might actually carry with them different potentials for whether it's a genetic thing, like an elf thing. Now my daughter, she's very much like an elf, but then so am I. I've got the elf ears to prove it. So, and if you look real closely, my ears are kind of pointy. Now, I I didn't make this happen. This isn't because of based on my personality, or my personality would be more based on the genetics. My mother used to joke that she was raped by an elf. So, go figure. Maybe there is sort of genetic imprints that do carry with them archetypal patterns. And then I think also vampiredom or things like that are much more about dominance and control. And I don't know. We'll have to explore what the different characteristics of a good vampire are. And I'd venture to say a lot of those are probably contagious personality traits.
Yes. Oh gosh, let's go back to the beginning with this one.
Okay.
Okay. Well, last time we talked about star seeds and where exactly we come from. Are we all native from Earth? Are we elves? Are we vampires? I'm going to explain where I'm from. I come from a very matriarchal society. It's a lot of our audience might know this word, but it is a Pleiadian. A Pleiadian actually is the right way to describe it. And the way that our race works is we're very harmonious. We're very peaceful people, and we evolve based off of that harmonious environment. But a lot of us, we come down here to Earth so that we can be ripped apart, so that we can go through traumas, that we can go through some of the worst traumatizing things. So we come here and we meet vampires, and we meet all these I don't want to call them parasites because that could just be so offensive, but we know that vampires live off of the energy of other beings, and they can be very dark, and that and they can insinuate and start and cause traumas within you when you interact with them. And the problem is if you allow that to drag you down and transform your soul, transform the chemical makeup in your body, and you can literally not so you started out as being preyed upon, and you become the prey because you learn how dark people can be and how much they take from you, and it can turn you into that. And that's our challenge as Pleiadians, is to not let ourselves be transformed and traumatized so much by this. We're supposed to grow from it and evolve from it, and not let us pull us down into that dark demonic reality. So you can.
So let's keep talking about vampires here, because you brought up an interesting point. It's like they prey on other people. So I definitely feel like there's a dominance energy to vampires. So I'm watching Vampire Diaries with my daughter recently. She's really into it, and I think there's definitely, well, let's just look at the archetype. So they talk about preying on people and that they've stepped up their level on the food chain. So you say they're what do you call that creature that's at the top of the food chain? It's like the apex predator, right?
I don't know the word. I call them very advanced. They're very evolved beings. They've been around here for a while. Yes.
Well, so like an apex predator. Apex predator is basically like the great white shark is the apex predator of its natural environment. But then humans become this sort of hyper apex predator that preys on all other life. So we've like created this total dominance over life on this planet. We've become sort of super apex predators. But then vampires is like this idea of like, well, what if it's a special kind of human that's kind of caught this sociopathic bug, and that bug makes them super apex predators. So this virus doesn't actually reduce their effectiveness. It actually increases their abilities. So that's the thing about the vampires, is like if we look at like who are the vampires in this world, who fits that archetype, I'd venture to say a lot of captains of industry, a lot of sort of exploitative, like if we go and we look at who's corrupting the US government right now and grabbing power for themselves and feeding off of everybody's energy, the bankers who stole trillions of dollars from our economy, like where did that all go? Like that's vampires, like sucking the blood out of our economy, and it cost hundreds of thousands, now cost many millions of people their jobs, their savings, their homes, their retirement. All of that is sucked out by this sort of vampire-esque greed or ability to step to the top, to the very apex of our hierarchies and sort of suck the life out of the system, and not necessarily giving back. Now, if you watch Vampire Diaries, some of these vampires are kind of good people, or they seem it. It's like they're relatable, like you like them, you know? And so that makes you think that maybe people can be apex predators, but like good predators. Like, yes, they're predators, and yes, they're dominant over everyone, but at the same time, they're like sort of good leaders. They're sort of good people. They have a sort of moral compass or kindness to them. So, yeah, I mean, this is something that we can kind of throw around. I'm going to read a couple of these comments while you jump in there, Shakti.
Oh gosh, I'm going to pull up the comments too here.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just keep talking.
No, I got something. I have something for you. Well, let's talk about the families, like the Bilderbergs and the Rothschilds and these people who they're called Illuminati, they're called elitists, and I've looked deep into that and why they're doing that. And a lot of them, these are families that believe that they are the gods of the universe, and they were given secrets essentially by their creators on how to rule and dominate this planet and how to do it. And they've been following that pathline for quite a while, and we see where it takes us now. Everybody's lost their homes. People are being siphoned from, and it's a greed thing too. I think a lot of it is psychopathic, to where they believe that if they were to evenly distribute all this economical wealth, then they would put themselves in danger. And so it's literally placing themselves that much higher above the general population because of their knowledge, because of where they come from, because of the secrets that they were given on how to do this. And I believe that it's a test. It's a test for humanity to actually evolve out of that. It's a test for us to figure out exactly what's happening to us and what's being taken from us and what's being stolen, and to take a step up and take control of our lives. And I know that we can do it. It's just a matter of everybody just waking up and realizing what's happening with that. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing that we do have to kind of reckon with as human beings, that there are some people who are very, very intelligent, very effective people. And they would, they tend to rise up the hierarchies. They tend to be very successful. And then the question is, okay, what, and you said originally when we were talking about what to do this show, and it's like humility, what gives someone who's got all of that ability to think, ability to manipulate situations, all of that power, the desire to be humble and consider themselves equal with someone who might have half their IQ. So let's do a little mind exploration here. Yeah. If you have an apex, we'll say that we'll just imagine them as this, billionaire or 100 millionaire captain of industry, connected to the rich and powerful, charismatic, strong, extremely intelligent, extremely knowledgeable, extremely disciplined, hardworking, and power hungry, right? So they've made the sacrifices necessary to rise to the very pinnacle of our society's power structures, and then you could say this person's IQ is probably north of 160, right? Let's say it's 180 just for fun. Now, if they had 180 IQ, which is very high, but, and we're going to say IQ, not just intellectual smarts, but like if you could grade somebody's IQ across the board, where work ethic, discipline, grit, tenacity, all of those things kind of come in, personality traits and charisma and emotional intelligence and all of those things come in too. And like, let's say their grade is 180 or higher. And then you realize that like there are a lot of people who are literally literally have half of their IQ. Does that make those people half a person? Like to someone who is completely engaged in the power structures in all of society's kind of games, they would seem like less of a person. They would seem like they're not really players in that sort of apex predators game, and they would probably be vulnerable to exploitation just like we exploit animals. So we've got this thing like, what brings an apex predator who's possibly a vampire, sociopathic, psychopathic, all the things you said, what brings that person to a place of humility where they can see themselves genuinely as an equal with maybe that 85 IQ individual who like just barely can hold a menial job?
Wow, that's good. Well, first of all, there are vampires out there that they're not humble, and they don't see themselves as equal. They see themselves as superior, and they see themselves as survival of the fittest, you could say. And a lot of them don't even have empathy towards what they're doing towards those lower evolved beings. But for those vampires that are wanting to connect and actually relate with humanity, I believe that they're doing it because they don't want to go down that road that they've already been down. There comes a point where I believe a person can do enough trauma, enough damage to another species, or that they no longer want to go down that road. And so they see the benefit of actually connecting with someone that's lower IQ than they are, because it's not necessarily about the intelligence of it. It's about the soul that they're connecting with. And it's a desire to be good, to feel good, to create those compassionate, energetic vibrations, which, by the way, is one of the most it's universally desired, universally preferred. So these vampires that do good and decide to switch their path and start being kinder and nicer to lower species, I believe it's because they've been they're either choosing not to go farther down a dark path, and they're switching their path and just wanting to connect and interact with the universe.
So, yeah, but I think there's this game that industry provides, where there's not only hierarchies, but there's this increase in effectiveness. So let's take some of the glorified captains of industries like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, or one of these icons that we all feel like we know, right? We project all of our we project a lot onto these people, but we also get enough of their life story just through the intrigue of who they are and what they've accomplished, that we kind of get a little glimpse at what they might be exhibiting. So like Steve Jobs, right? Brilliant guy, made shit really fantastic in terms of tech. The Apple tech under his watch was just glorious, right? But at the same time, a lot of people who worked directly with him said he was a monster. He might have been like a vampire. And I've heard that the same is true for the founder of Starbucks. I've heard this, I've Bill Gates used to scream at people in the meeting room. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He was very hard on people. And what I think happens in hierarchies is the people who are working under others are giving not only their energy towards the hierarchy. So we've got this pyramid, right? And as each step goes up the pyramid, people are not only giving their energy up the hierarchy in terms of their loyalty and their efforts and doing what they're told and their compliance, but they're also, I've experienced this, they are also giving their intelligence. Like there's this ineffable energy that is beyond just physical labor or productivity, that is like, it feeds people. So I've had the experience of when I had a bunch of people reporting to me, I became more intelligent, and they all seemed like to be befuddled and not so, like, they just weren't as crystal clear in their ability to think as I was. And it frustrated me because it was like, can you guys see, this is obvious, this is how it should be? And it was like that all the time. There was always another problem that the team couldn't figure it out, and I'd come in and I'd look at it for 3 minutes and solve the problem, and it was like I was on fire. Like, my intelligence was spiking, but I also noticed that, like, my team's intelligence seemed to be wanting. Like, there was kind of a I don't know how to say it, but like I felt disappointment in their ability to think through difficult problems and solve them themselves. Well, I've also been on the other side of that, where I've been working for people who were kind of like the alpha dog in the situation, and I found myself like making stupid moves or not being able to solve problems that this alpha dog, like, all of a sudden, like, would just listen for 20 seconds to what I was working on all week and be like, well, why didn't you do this? And I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, why didn't I do that? Or they'd say something and it would take me a while to like figure out what they were saying and catch on to what they meant, and it made me feel stupider. So I think that there is a vampire-esque quality just to hierarchies and boss-subordinate relationships, where the subordinates are literally feeding their leader or their boss some of their, not only their life force, but their intelligence. And what that can reveal to us, like what we can do with that, is recognize that whoever we're giving that leadership role to in our lives, if we're letting someone else sort of be that alpha over us, higher up in the hierarchy, we are essentially trusting them with our own life force and intelligence, and trusting them to be a good custodian of that life force and intelligence and lead us all to a better place. Because that's the beauty of it. The downside is, yeah, a little bit like a vampire, and they're sucking your intelligence and life force away. But the upside is you could take 5, 10, or 50,000 people, however big that pyramid is, and you can focus all of that intelligence up the chain into one person's mind and give sort of this singular person. So let's just say it was a 10-person team. That singular person who's responsible for those 10 people, and those 10 people are feeding, now has like way more intelligence or intelligent energy or life force at their disposal to think more clearly, to solve the problems more readily, and to lead that group to a better place. And the group's signing up to give that leader that energy and that sort of intelligence in order to benefit as a tribe for doing that. That's just an idea about how this stuff might work.
I think about religion when you say that. So religion is where everybody goes to one room and they worship and they focus into something, and they're feeding into a higher being or a god to go to a better place. That's how I see it on a mass scale. But the way that you described it, Garrett, you outlined it amazing. That was pretty perfect. I believe if you're working for a vampire that is, feeding off of you so that they can direct whatever goal they're going, either that vampire is he's advanced, and as in he knows how to work his team, and he knows how to give back to them so that they're giving back to him, and it's an equal energetic exchange. And I think that's so important when a group wants to go somewhere better. But they're like Steve Jobs yelling, Bill Gates yelling when they're freaking out because they're dealing with lower subordinates. Like, honestly, I like people like that. I like being around intelligent people that I can learn from and take that energy from them. As long as they're, they can make people feel terrible too. And I've done that too, so maybe we're all guilty of that at one point.
Well, I think this is the teachable moment here, is that I think we've all, well, not necessarily all of us have been in both sides of the situation, but I think you can be. And even stories like Cinderella, right? We have the wicked stepsisters, right? They're like feeding on Cinderella's energy to make themselves better, give them the better dress or the better thing or the better status or whatever, and yet because, and this is the human tendency that these fairy tales tell us about, is that there's this tendency, like the one who is feeding you, when you're up higher on the hierarchy, there's a disgust that people feel for those lower in the hierarchy. And this is a natural human feeling. It's not a good feeling. It's contemptible, the feeling. And that's why the fairy tales sort of are showing again and again these wicked step siblings or stepmothers or whatever that are higher up on the hierarchy, exhibiting disgust and indulging in their disgust of the lowly Cinderella, who then becomes the princess and totally transcends them and becomes higher up in the hierarchy. And isn't that a wonderful experience to, you know, be the peon, be the one who is being put upon, be the one who's servile and serving these contemptible miscreants who have somehow gotten on top of you through a bad marriage or something of that sort in the hierarchy, and they're abusing you, and then all of a sudden one day you become the princess, you become at the top of the hierarchy, and the rightful king, the rightful princess, the rightful sort of benevolent leader sits at the top of this hierarchy. And wow, isn't that what fairy tales are saying a lot of the time, is that if you have power over others, if you're given status over others, your duty, your obligation, and your opportunity is to become this benevolent leader that really, like you said, showers those who are serving them with love and energy too, so that there's a it's a fair trade, that those who are serving you are also getting served by your leadership, and that you're a good benevolent leader. Whereas I think what has happened in our society is that we are very indulgent towards people who climb up either the corporate ladder or who work our capitalist system to their advantage, and then abuse those who end up beneath them. Instead of being givers and being part of a virtuous cycle, they're just takers. They're just taking from the system, and they're abusing those who unfortunately are beneath them in the hierarchical system that our society and capitalist system represents. So what can we get from that is like, okay, well, I've seen even just in familial relationships where daughters will treat their mothers like peons, or vice versa. Like whoever's the dominant female in the relationship, like, screams and belittles the one serving them. And like, this is a terrible thing. This is a terrible thing. So how do we remedy it? How do we learn from this?
OMG. It's a messy process. It's such a messy process. I believe for the story of Cinderella, I think you have to be really careful when you're being abused by a vampire and someone that's higher than you, because what it can do to you is it can make you a really hard person and a mean person. And you learn how to do to other people what that vampire is doing to you. And
which is becoming the vampire. Like that's how vampires make more vampires. They, if you're put upon by a vampire and they get their teeth into you and they turn you so that you can be turned into a vampire by an abusive vampire, which you want to watch out for.
And the story of Cinderella, it's all pretty and pink. Like they make it look like she was such a humble, servant that was being abused all the time. But I mean, I believe for someone to grow out of that and to become the princess and to have that love story, they have to get mean, honestly. And tell me if I'm wrong, Garrett. Tell me if I'm wrong. Like, if you're being abused by a vampire, you can't sit there and be like, oh, I'm going to be humble and I'm just going to take it. I'm going to do the good thing or the godly thing. Like, there's a sort of transformation that happens inside of you, and you become the predator. And I'll say this from personal experience. That's happened to me, and what I've learned is that you have to be careful with your character and where you're going with it, and what kind of person you're turning into, so that you have to gauge yourself and stay in that energetic field where you aren't vamping off of other people around you, so that you're not becoming that perpetrator. So what do you think
Yeah.
about
You know,
that?
yeah, and I agree. I think you have to, in order to be able to fight the vampires. It's like, you have to have the same strength as the vampire. So if you are not an apex predator, or you don't have the strength of an apex predator, you're really in trouble. I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to beat the vampires. Well, I don't know if there's no way. Like, Cinderella seems to have managed to do it by some sort of luck and fairy godmother and the stars shining down upon her, and just sort of the fortune. I would call, like, her rise to the top is very much law of attraction. Like, she was just a kind, beautiful soul that the birds and the butterflies all loved, and the chipmunks helped make her dress or whatever it is, and the mice, everybody like wanted to serve her, who was part of nature, and then the unnatural ones just abused her. And so she sort of miraculously rose to the top. So I think that's one path. I think the other path, which is more the egoic path, or the ape man path, is that if you are part of an ape hierarchy and you want to be able to become a benevolent leader of that hierarchy, your chances are you're not going to luck into a fairy godmother that waves her wand and turns your pumpkin into a chariot and drives you to the prince who's waiting to fall in love with you. Chances are you're going to have to fight your way to the top, and if you do, that means you have to become a monster in order to fight the monsters. And then the caveat to that is you need to become a monster without losing yourself to the archetype of the monster. So you become a vampire, you're able to fight other vampires, but you stay connected to your inner light and your inner compass enough, even while you're being a vampire, to rein it in and say, okay, these assholes needed to be fought and trampled and put down while you climb up your ladder, and these people are good souls who are just serving the greater good by being part of your organization or situation, and to have that discretion where you can be the monster to fight monsters, but you're not always the monster. You're someone who's got the power of a monster to fight the other monsters, while being able to rein in that power and be the gentle, loving, kind soul that we all sort of wish we could be all the time.
Yeah, those are heroes. Oh my God, that's what everybody wants, Garrett. Is a hero that can
Yeah.
do that. If that's the ego way of taking it. But taking this a bit farther, those people and corporations that are siphoning from the economy, and they are monsters and they are vampires and they step on people along the way up. These creatures they're so intelligent that they understand the law of attraction. They do not feel guilt, they don't feel compassion, and they don't feel shame. And so these feelings of shame, guilt, they come with the energetic frequency, and so they don't actually experience consequences off of vamping off of people. And so they're just walking around and they're like, hey, life is good, I can cut someone's head off and be completely fine with it the very next day.
Yeah, and
And
this kind of
so that's where we need our heroes.
Yeah, well, but this reminds me of you talking about the cows last week. Like, the cows would have said exactly what you just said about us, right?
Yes.
Like, people, humans don't experience guilt. They will cut your head off at the drop of a hat. Like, that's the cow experience.
Can I go farther? I gotta go down this road. Let me take this. Okay, so these vampires that are in these corporate positions running the economy, what they're doing is they are conditioning humans through this experience. They're teaching humans to be very callous and not sensitive to what exactly they're eating. they're turning humans into vampires, into people just like them. And I mean, what do you do about it? You have to know the agenda and why they're doing it, so that you don't become that and become so flippant, like, oh my god, I'm just gonna go grab a burger and I don't give a shit where it came from. It's good, it's delicious, it's addictive. And there's a lot of people that are like that, and I consider that vampirism. But they're being created, and when you're consuming meat, when you're putting that into your body, it just accelerates it. It just shuts everything off, and you just keep going down that path until you die and you never know anything better. Oof, is that too much?
No, it's not too much, but I'm just I'm like, there's something in my mind that's telling me the cow metaphor is really informative here. And by the way, I heard your comment about the elf thing, and if you watched, I don't know, a few minutes in, I went into some detail about the elf archetype. That's at the beginning of this live stream. We can go back to that later. But with the cows, it's like, okay, here we have these creatures who seem very gentle. They don't seem like so smart. They're not, they don't seem like predators at all. But here they are put upon by us, and we think nothing of slaughtering millions of them every day. We think nothing of it. And then when we go and we talk about these apex individuals sort of at the helm, at the power levers of society, I think they very much regard other human beings like cattle, like we regard cattle. It's the same sort of thing. So like in the hierarchy, there's cattle, there's regular people, and then there's sort of like this elite class that regards the regular people with as little humanity as we regard cattle. You don't think about their feelings. Like, how often do we think about the cow's feelings? We just don't. I mean, often, okay, granted, I think about the cow's feelings when I look at cows in the eyes, or when my someone in my family, reminds me of like these poor cows. Yes, but then how often do you just dehumanize is not the right word, but desentientize these cows, where you don't regard them as having feelings, don't regard them as having a soul, don't care what other people are doing to them. That's very much part of this hierarchical vampire predator thing that's going on. And unfortunately, I think the sort of this elite, and we call them elite, and I don't like calling them elite because I don't have high regard for most of the people who sort of fit in this higher level societal structure. I just think a lot of them are born into it, a lot of them are trained into it, and a lot of them fought way too hard in some sociopathic, pathological, psychopathic way to get there. See, it's a lot of nasty people at the top of this predatorial hierarchy that really regard the people who are just lower middle class, lower class, whatever, is not really human. Like they don't feel like they're human. They regard them like most people regard cattle. It's just how hierarchy works.
And the planet Earth has been under that type of prison. I call it a prison. Like when they're conducting that kind of behavior on other creatures, and they're destroying and keeping them, not allowing them to advance. And what happened, and this is what's happened over the years, over the past hundreds of thousands of years, is that Earth has been giving off this frequency of pain and suffering, and it's it's shooting out into the universe, and we need a lot of help. So when species are vamping off of other species like that, and we can't get out of it ourselves, and we can't evolve and pull ourselves out from under that thumb, it's a thumb, then I believe that we do need help, and that's where I connect with. And I know we're going out here, but like it's connecting with other sentient beings, more higher evolved intelligent beings that don't participate in these lower frequency activities. And so, I mean, there are a lot of benevolent beings that are out there that recognize what's happening, and they see the pain that's happening, and so they interject. They come in personally to help us that way. So, and I'm kind of a spokesperson for that a little bit, but but yes, I do. I mean, I don't revere these elitists or Illuminati that are at the top, and a lot of them cause so much pain and suffering that um, they create psycho people that want to go in and just shoot them in the head, just get rid of them. Like, if that'll stop the suffering, boom, let's just take them out. But that's a violent way to do it. So
Yeah. But it just reminds me of that same sort of sentiment that you were describing last week about cows don't like people, and I was like, oh, weird, you know, and I sat with that, now I've percolated a week, and now I go, oh, I can see like that sentiment you just said, like, let's go take them out, like I don't like those people at the top of the hierarchy. Well, it's like the cows are probably, you know, they feel the same way, so that's interesting. Someone here is talking about zombies. Our metaphor for brainless people who wish to have one, take it from other people. I think zombies are also, I think, like, what's interesting is archetypes will sort of surge up. If you see a lot of an archetype in our arts, that means that there's a lot of that archetype going on in our society and culture. So, like, okay, we beat down vampires. We beat the dead horse of vampires. So we've talked about vampires, but zombies. What are zombies? I think zombies is what we're creating a ton of right now, especially in the United States, with the overindulgence in video games and smoking dope, eating Doritos. It's just like you even see this stuff on Instagram now. It's kind of these kind of hilarious things where, like, there's some guy who's playing Fortnite and he's so addicted to Fortnite and he's just sort of like zoned out playing Fortnite that, like, his girlfriend is like, you know, getting naked and throwing herself at him or doing all these sort of things that normally a guy would like, hey, let's go have fun. No, like, he's just sucked into the screen. He's not even human anymore. He's a zombie. And I think that's what we're creating in our society. And I think it's semi-intentional that I think there's right now what is being created in our society is the zombie class. And the zombie class will basically be as automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence take over more and more of the jobs, which over the next 10 years will probably start nearing some crazy percent. Let's say 80% of the jobs, if not more, are taken. And in fact, I think if you even look at McKinsey, they predicted literally 50% of all jobs will be gone in the next 10 years due to automation and robotics and artificial intelligence. Well, okay, what are all those people going to do? What do you do with all those people? Well, if you don't do something with them, they're going to start getting aggravated that they're unemployed and they'll start rioting in the streets. So you need to find some way of channeling their inherent human aggression. And originally capitalism was what was designed to do that. At the turn of the century, back in the 19th, you know, when we just came into the 1900s, the idea was like, okay, as long as people are competing in a capitalistic way, they're not going to be rioting in the streets and having revolutions. So that was, you know, consumerism and keeping up with the Joneses or whatever, help people channel their inherent aggression. Well, without that anymore, without jobs to keep people channeling their aggression towards getting the job done, we need to create these sort of quasi situations that stupefy people and medicate them enough so that they're not a menace to themselves or others, right? And so what is that? It's like, well, get them high, right? It's no accident that marijuana is becoming legal everywhere. I think the powers that be, or whoever like used to have a chokehold on you know, what drugs are legal in our society, I think they are now like, well, you know, marijuana makes people peaceful. You never see fights on marijuana. Like, people have become docile. A lot of times, you know, they'll just sit on the couch and do nothing because they're high, and that actually that serves the interest of controlling a massive population that's underemployed. So you get people high, get them addicted to video games. So now they're high and playing video games, eating their Doritos, and like they can live off of like McDonald's, Doritos, video games, and weed, and never get off their couches and never even look around and say, you know what, this is a shitty little apartment I'm living in. Why do I have to live in this shitty little apartment while these elite class people are driving around on yachts and having this, enjoying the most beautiful, scenic, perfect parts of the world? Why am I stuck in this little hole? Well, you don't even ask those questions if you're just high on weed, playing video games, eating your Doritos, and addicted to the McDonald's hamburgers and the Doritos and all that stuff. It's like, there's your zombie for you. Like, we're turning a generation into these zombies that will just go hide in their rooms and play their video games and zombie out so that the elites can have the nicer parts of the world. That's one idea.
Well, let's go back into zombies. I think you got the culprit wrong here just a little bit, Garrett, but you can correct me. Okay, I gotta tell you something. It's fluoride. Fluoride in your water goes into your pineal gland, which is essentially called the third eye, and it calcifies it. The average human is supposed to have a pineal gland the size of a quarter. Most people's pineal glands is only the size of a dime. And what your gland does is it releases DMT. So last time we talked about how I'd never had DMT before. Well, I got to take that back because my body naturally produces it because I got rid of fluoride out of my water. It's no longer in my body. But fluoride, it's in the water systems of America, okay? That is definitely going to turn you into a zombie, like wide-eyed, brainless zombie. That's not even thinking. And then they do it through GMOs by genetically modifying our food, which changes your DNA. That's not natural either. And in our atmosphere, there are chemtrails, like our air is being polluted. That's going to turn everybody into a zombie. But Garrett, God, weed. No, you can't say weed. Well, it does. It causes people to, I think if you overindulge, you can overindulge in weed and it can make you lazy. But my experience with it, I have to tell you, I started smoking weed for 3 years, about 3 years ago. And what it did for me is it broke my brain out of the matrix that we live in. I no longer think in the box because of it. But I believe it was illegal for so many years and not used as an economical resource because of that very fact of what weed can actually do. I mean, people say that it causes things like psychosis, it causes you to be like lazy, and it causes you to be weird, but it does a lot of things, and it has a lot of different effects. And what I tell people is that if you've never smoked weed before, you're just a regular 9 to 5, you go to your job, weed will take you out of this world. It will take you out of your body, but like everything, like moderation in all things, if you overdo it, it can turn you into a zombie. So yes, I think there's like a 50-50 there, and you just got to be careful. You have to be smart enough to know what it's doing to your body and how to manage it. And if you can't manage it, then maybe you shouldn't be smoking it or drinking, or that's with every drug, isn't it?
Well, right. And so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying weed is like, let's take a step back. Like, alcohol was the drug of choice for a long time. Alcohol, cigarettes, coffee. Like, those are the drugs of the Industrial Revolution. So why?
Yes.
Because like, coffee's going to get you to do your job for longer hours. Cigarettes will help, take a little edge off the stress, but keep you sober so you can still do your job. And then once you're done with a grueling day of doing shitty work that you don't really want to do, and a job you don't really want to have, that's completely antithetical to all of your passions and life force as a human being, you can go hit the bars, drink your alcohol, and forget about it all. Like, those are the drugs of choice for the Industrial Revolution. Once you move into the next revolution, which is sort of the intelligence revolution or the robotics revolution, whoever owns the robots owns the world. And if you don't want everybody coming at you saying, no, dude, you can't just get to control the entire world because you're the last dude to invent that little thing that takes robotics from here to here, that takes intelligence from here to here, when there's like 3 miles of road that all of humanity has traversed to get to this point. But some dude's gonna do it, and the way that you get everybody to just go inside and not riot in the streets is like, okay, weed is gonna be a helpful substance for that. Now, can weed help you with other things? Can it like open your mind to things and help you be more sensitive to other people emotionally, and maybe come down off of your own psychosis? Absolutely. And alcohol, I think, can be really helpful to like lower your inhibitions and help you have a good time sometimes. Like, so I'm not saying it's a bad drug, but what I am saying is that the overindulgence of weed, combined with video game addiction, combined with like fast food delivery, like you don't need to leave your apartment, and you're just gonna basically sit there glued to a screen, smoking weed, playing video games. I think playing video games is worse than the smoking weed. I think if people were like hanging out their apartments, communing with each other, all high and giggling and eating peanut butter together, like I think that's a much more, like, that's actually living. Fuck the system, fuck the hierarchy. We don't need to riot in the streets. We're living here. We're all like communing and eating peanut butter and giggling and like dancing. Like, that's great. But I think weed combined with sort of the zombie, maybe zombie really is just like being glued to a screen playing your video games. It's like that's what the zombie archetype is just like it's watching a screen or being stuck on a screen. And so now you literally have kids who are becoming zombies, looking at their screens, playing video games where there are zombies in the video games that they're fighting. I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous, but that's it.
Like a joke.
And then Jesse mentioned earlier, the comment's gone now, but Jesse mentioned earlier the opioids. It's like, yeah, there's a real, okay, weed, it's probably not that bad. It's probably a lot better than anything else out there that you could be doing aside from my favorites,
okay,
no, but I'm saying, like, I think there's different spectrums of drugs. I would recommend certain psychedelics over weed. I think you're gonna have a much better time, a much more real time on those. But weed can actually kind of get you there. But then there's the other angle that Jesse brought up, which is this opioid epidemic, which is like now you've got real fucking zombies. Like, this is the bad kind of zombies. And you talked about the meth addiction and that creating these shadow people. Maybe that's the zombie thing too. So yeah, so I think there is a zombie class being created. There's a vampire class, which would be like these blood-sucking, hyper ambitious, power hungry individuals climbing up the ranks towards their elitist Elysium type society where they have, where a very select few has basically all the wealth. And then you have this sort of zombie culture being created right now where, the masses are just so not disheartened, but maybe disheartened, but discouraged. They don't really think that they don't really think that there's anything they could do that would be more gratifying than sitting and playing their video games and eating their takeout food. And so it's like, whoa. So we got some archetypes that are festering right now in our society, and I could definitely see in 10 years there being an entire zombie class of people who are just sucked into some sort of artificial reality, virtual reality type of video game situation, and just gone to it.
I call those people consumerists. What are they doing for society? Like, what do you do with them? I don't want to scare people with the thought that I had with this, but what are these vampires and these elitists going to do with all these consumerists and all these zombies? Like, let's talk about Bill Gates for a second. I know a lot of people like Bill Gates. I don't, not at all. He's like the king of vaccinations, and he goes into third world countries, and I believe that he actually kills off populations with his vaccinations. And so a lot of people they fed into you could call it a conspiracy theory, as in, is there going to be a blackout? I mean, what's going to happen to such a huge population of people? We have 8 billion people on the planet right now, and
let me just jump in there just a little, for the sake of truth on our show.
Sure.
We have closer to 7 billion, or at least we crossed the line to 7 billion in 2012. I don't think we're nearing 8 billion, but maybe we are. And if I'm wrong, anyone wants to Google it and just tell us how many freaking people there are on the planet, let us know. But the other thing is, I've met Bill Gates. I've had dinner at his house. he did
All
not
right.
strike me as sort of like a genocidal maniac. I think he deeply believes in the importance of malaria vaccines, just because malaria, like the most dangerous creature on Earth that kills like more people than anything, I think, is mosquitoes. Even more than people kill people. It's like mosquitoes kill more people.
Okay.
Malaria is fucking harsh, and in a third world country, we think vaccines have all this evil potential because we're kind of at the tail end of what vaccines can do, because our U.S. society has been so erratic. All the hard, horrible diseases have been eradicated. The measles, the smallpox, the malaria. We don't have to face the kind of infant mortality that those in the third world do have to face. And the reason people in the third world have to face this kind of mortality is generally just there are these diseases that live in less than sanitary environments and thrive in those environments and kill children. And now I think what could be argued, though, is Africa is going to be like the biggest population explosion ever, bigger than China, in the next 10 years. So what are we going to do with all those people? Because the thing is, whenever vaccinations come in and save a population from these infant mortalities, you have families that are used to having 10 kids just so that one or two of them survive, and all of a sudden 10 of them start surviving, and you have a population explosion. We're about to see what happens there in Africa when that starts transpiring.
So I have a question for you, Garrett.
Yeah.
With vaccines, do you believe that although they have saved many lives, do you believe that they can also be used as a tool to turn people into zombies and to hurt bodies, and flip it to the dark side? Yeah, it saves people, but do you think that the creators of vaccines and can use that to their advantage and hurt people because of it?
I think, like we were saying earlier, genetics can make you into an elf. So it's like genetics is, basically that's like your blueprint that tells you what chemicals your body to make. Tells your body what chemicals to make. Now, if you get vaccinated, that's telling your immune system kind of like what chemicals to make or what to attack or what to, and I've been fraught with allergies my whole life. I'm basically allergic to this planet. And I think vaccines might have contributed to that. So I definitely agree that vaccines have a negative side to them. But the positive side is I'm alive, so maybe I'm allergic to the planet, and maybe I'm a bit of a psycho at times, and it could be because of the vaccines. I'm extremely vigilant against allergens and dust, and even like I'm a germaphobe. Like, so what are all the? Could that just be that my immune system is just so hyper vigilant that it's making me mentally like OCD and everything needs to be clean, and I need to use my Purell, and I can't have a dusty pillow, and like I'm not gonna that lovely couch there is made out of porous material that's likely to have all kinds of dust and dust mites in it, and I won't go sit in it because I'm a freak that way, and everything needs to be like perfectly clean and perfectly sanitized. And what is that? Maybe that's the vaccines talking. Maybe that's not really me. Maybe that's not the real me. So I give you that. But I ask at the same time, it's like we do need to have a balance in terms of, okay, maybe the vaccines cause that psychosis in me, but at the same time, maybe I'm alive because of the vaccines.
Yes. I mean, if I give them too much credit, our alchemists and all that kind of stuff, not alchemists, but our chemists, I believe that they know exactly what they're doing and what actually heals and what hurts. And I think that they're using it as a way to hurt and heal. And they're in control of it, and so, but I don't know.
I would warn people about giving sort of giving some boogeymen at the top of the hierarchy too much credit in terms of their ability to plan and manipulate. Like, I don't think somebody said this, I can't remember who said this great quote, but it's something to the effect of like, never sort of give to conspiracy or malevolence what human incompetence could explain, you know. So I think it's more likely that there's a lot of stupid shit that's happening just because we don't know any better, just because nobody's knows any better, or even those who do know better aren't getting listened to by the ones who are in charge, and the ones who are in charge aren't not listening to them because they're trying to fuck over a big part of the population. Maybe they just don't know any better, or maybe they're just too busy like with something in their own life to pay attention to the thing that they should be paying attention to. So I just
I love that, Garrett. So, like, never give credit to boogeyman if human incompetence can explain it, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah. I mean, it's like,
all right.
And never's probably too strong a word. I think there are times when someone's obviously fucking over everybody, like this Russian thing, like Russia getting involved with our elections. Okay. That's not just a bunch of people getting stupid and voting for stupid candidates and things like that and having stupid ideas and having stupid fights. That's literally Russians infiltrating our social media and social networks and inciting fights between both sides of the aisle to fuck with the American population enough that we couldn't choose a really decent guy like Bernie Sanders. We instead had the choice between two relatively flawed people compared to Bernie Sanders, and nobody was going to win that election except for the Russians. So it's like, so I think there are places where, okay, you have some conspirators like the Russians fucking with people's minds on a massive level. I have seen pitch decks of companies that are like offering this service, like they're going to be their business, is like to do this kind of service. I mean, I know these services are out there. I know there are conspiracies out there, so I'm not naive, but I'm also saying like, I think generally the conspiracies are much more on the level of trying to control political outcomes, and trying to consolidate power over genocide. At this point, I think that's, I could be wrong. You show me something compelling, I'd listen to it, you know. So
power over genocide. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? Genocide? I
don't know. I mean, you know, I think there's gonna.
I believe it.
Well, you said 8 billion. To your credit, you said 8 billion. I tried to correct you and said I thought it was closer to 7 billion, and someone did the Google and they said it was 7.6. So technically, you were closer, Shakti. You were closer. You were closer by 10%. So yeah. So what's going to happen? I think we all as a humanity have a really big problem to solve. Well, a few of them. One is the planet is, due to so many people being on this planet, like the carrying capacity of this planet to give everybody sort of a good life that probably everybody who's watching the show experiences. Like, we couldn't give 8 billion people the types of the level of resources that you're probably living on right now. It's like there's not enough carrying capacity to the planet to do that. So then we're gonna have to become much more efficient about what people get in terms of resources and how they use them and how we all use them and how we distribute them. That's one side of it. But then the other side of it is like, will people be happy to be given a little apartment or a little living situation with humble, like back to the humility thing, you'll be given like a humble living situation and really no chance of advancement because the robots and the artificial intelligence do all the work and they're controlled by a select few. So it's like, what are we going to do as a humanity about who controls the robots? Because whoever controls the robots rules the world. And it doesn't need, like, you might think the government's gonna do something. There's gonna be some jackass like Zuckerberg who figures out how to make that one little incremental step in general artificial intelligence, like that one little extra innovation that just blows up like Facebook blew up. And next thing you know, they control all the robots. They have all these hyper intelligent robots that are more powerful than any army, any standing army, and good luck at any government trying to rein that in, because that individual will basically rule the world. And that's what we're probably going to see in our lifetimes, is some of these dramas playing out. And the question is, what can we do about it now? What is there anything we can do about it? Is there anything we can do to democratize intelligence and robotics so that no single person or no sort of 12 families get to inherit all the wealth and control and power in the world, while the other 8 billion people live in what will probably be some form of zombie life, like given like some sort of that. I mean, we've got the opiate epidemics, we've got the video games, we've got people like just sort of becoming zombies. Like, what are we going to see in our lifetime around this?
This is what I would tell our viewers. If that's a scary scenario, which for a lot of people it is, because they're going to lose their jobs, and these robots are going to be doing the mundane things, and I believe it's going to force people to actually look intrinsically at their own value. What can you do to contribute to society? Like, I mean, are you creative? It's going to force people into evolution and force them into their own creative side. What we're always pushing people to do in the first place. But that's nerve-wracking, Garrett. That's nerve-wracking.
And is society going to become like Black Mirror? I think has like a great episode of people living in these like little cells. They're almost like these little jail cells, and then they ride their stationary bicycles all day long, accumulating video game points that they can then spend on little media luxuries and things like that. But it's a pretty lame life. And they all dream of being able to get on that American Idol type show where they might be catapulted into the elite class. And I think that's actually a very real and present danger of how society is going to be run, where you're basically going to have contests like American Idol and Survivor and The Bachelor and things like that, where a few people will get a chance based on their talent or their good looks or something of that sort to maybe catapult themselves into the elite class purely based on superficial qualities. And then everybody else is like just basically stuck in a servile, or not even servile, because it's like there's nothing to do, but basically this sort of zombie-esque existence where people will probably be given useless challenges to lose themselves in, so that they don't rise up and riot and say, well, why do I get this little tiny piece of this little square in the system, while people in the elite class get the big yachts and the big ocean and the nice beaches and like all the good stuff. It's like there's I don't know, we'll have to see what happens there.
Is this before or after the genocide? After these elitists try to kill off 5 billion people?
Well, right. So it's like, I can see a war being perpetrated by evil motherfuckers at the helm of power to try to get rid of some of the population.
Honestly, like Garrett, I really want to know, and here's the reason: because in church, like in religions, they tell you they have something called the second coming or an Armageddon or a huge blackout, and we had the Y2K, right? So people, I think they have it ingrained in their minds for something huge, some world catastrophic thing. And in religions, they tell you have your food storage, be prepared to not have your typical resources that you have on an everyday level, because it might be cut off. I don't know. Is that too conspiracy?
I mean, I mean, I've been what do they call those people who keep food stores and water and stuff in their cellar? It's not a survivalist. Yeah. What are those people called? I don't know what they're called, but but I've done that. Like for Y2K, I was ready, and then SARS I think came out, and it was like some virus, and then swine flu, like a prepper, right? That's what they call them, preppers. So like I tend to be hyper vigilant and prepared about things. So like now just this week I threw out a giant crate of tuna and mustard that's as old as my 18-year-old son. It's like, that's not, I had my daughter, I'm like, hey, will you Google how long tuna can last in the can? And she's like, 3 years. I'm like, how about 18 years? She's like, no, 3. And that's it. And I'm like, all right, I guess we got to throw this stuff out. So,
that's awesome.
So I can totally get into that prepping mentality where it's like, okay, you know, the genocidal disease is coming, some sort of biological extinction level event where only the fabulous few are inoculated against this terrible, you know, zombie disease, and then, you know, everyone wakes up and there's a few 100 million people left in the world, and that's it. Totally possible, horrible to imagine. And, you know, we could, I think there's some religious nut who gets made fun of by, I can't remember the name of it, but there's these great YouTube spoofs of this guy's show, and on his show he's constantly like selling prepper stuff. So if we keep talking this way, I might start trying to sell like the prepper materials. Buy this and you'll survive the zombie apocalypse that's almost upon us. Oh man, right. I don't know. You could talk me into it. Yeah.
I don't know either. I don't know. So something to think about. But
well, that was weird, and that was great. Okay, so Shakti, is your intuition, tune into your intuition now. We only have a few minutes left. If anyone has an important question or statement, we'll read it online now. Jesse says, as you said it once, Garrett, welcome to the beginning, or something like that. Oh, the beginning is near. That was a sign that I held up at the beginning of the Occupy movement. Well, okay. So where are we, Shakti? Are you getting any hits on your astral realm?
Yeah, I have a few times when it comes to I call it a blackout. That's what I call it. And it's where everything gets shut down and there's a lot of mayhem and a lot of chaos. And I've seen it a few times, but the thing is I don't know if I'm just tapping into a collective fear, just something that people are feeding into, because that's how Santa Claus is. Santa Claus is energetically real because so many people put their energy into that. So I don't know if I'm just feeling into what everybody's fearing, or if I'm feeling into something that is actually going to happen. But when I have seen this genocide or this blackout, it freaks me out. It really does. It makes me like want to jump on the bandwagon and get prepared and get all that food and everything. And maybe that was religiously indoctrinated into me, but I don't think there's any harm in being prepared. So that's what I'll tell everybody.
Well, I like the idea of being prepared too. I have a strong belief in Murphy's Law, and the way I understand Murphy's Law to work is that if you don't make a sacrifice to the gods will punish you. And this God being sort of the cosmic irony department overseen by that basically oversees Murphy's Law. So you've got this situation where you've got this multiverse that you're living in where anything could happen, everything's in potentiality. And if things get too good, the cosmic irony department's going to have to step in and make things shitty for you. Like, that's just how it works. Like, the movies aren't good if you don't have tension and conflict and things like that. So if you don't prepare for the really bad stuff, that I think it makes it more likely to happen. But if you over prepare a little bit for the bad stuff, it's like, well, you would feel too vindicated if it happened. You've got this basement full of food and water and guns and ammo, and you're ready to survive, right? Like, it would just be too easy. It would be too glorious if like the bad shit happened then. So like the best way to sort of appease the gods or appease the cosmic irony department or appease Murphy's Law is to go stock up, be prepared, and then Murphy will be like, yeah, nah, dude, it's not gonna happen.
20 years later, we got tuna. Oh, I don't know. You got to make that judgment call for yourself.
I mean, I think that might actually be the psychological root of human sacrifice, or all sacrifices, is like, okay, we know the gods can send drought and famine and disease and all these horrible things, and we feel so vulnerable. So if like we kill a few of our favorite people, like maybe those things won't come at us because we've already suffered enough. I think there's some sort of archetypal underpinning as we're talking about archetypes in this show. I think there's a deep unconscious archetypal underpinning for make a sacrifice and you will be spared the bigger cataclysm, the bigger catastrophe. And I think that's kind of what drove all kinds of sacrifice, especially religious sacrifice, over the millennia that humans have existed.
Right.
So make your sacrifice. Put in the